Welcome to SHOT Show TV, and I'm David Lombardo. And we're going to discuss something that has always bugged me. We have Chuck Sykes here, who's the Director of Game and Fish for the state of Alabama, and the subject is the Pittman Robertson Act. This bothers me, and I want you to clarify this. There's an excise tax on guns and outdoor equipment that we use so much. That tax is the most beneficial thing to conservation there is it not?
If it weren't for the Pittman Robertson Act, state agencies like ours, we would cease to function. That is probably 75% of my annual budget where we put conservation on the ground for the public comes through the Pittman Robertson tax.
Now, and I want to get into exactly how it works, but the one thing I really want to underscore is this. It isn't a tax for fishermen or hunters. It's a tax for conservation. So whether you fish and hunt or you don't, it's based on science. And what it does is it keeps an ecological balance. Is that basically it?
It does. Just in the most simplistic terms, it's a 10 to 11% excise tax that manufacturers of firearms and ammunition pay, and a lot of other things, but we'll just talk about that since we're here at the SHOT Show. That money goes to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. It goes into a big pot, and then it's distributed throughout the states based on the land base of our state and the number of hunters that we have in our state. And then we can take that money and we buy property for public hunting, all of our wildlife research, all of our management on our WMAs and public properties. All of that is based on, and that foundation of the Pittman Robertson. So everything that people, when they buy guns and ammunition, whether they hunt or not, they are helping pay for conservation for people who don't do anything, that don't target shoot or don't hunt, but if they bird watch, if they hike on public land, there's a good chance a hunter or a target shooter paid or helped pay a large portion of that piece of property.
And what a lot of people don't understand is the science behind this. So whoever does it, scientists, whatever, they'll look at what's the flock of geese, or what's the flock of ducks, or how big is the herd of deer for this region, what is sustainable in terms of what can this region support. Because as people move in and build subdivisions and do all that, the amount of food plots gets smaller. You have to keep it balanced. The people who say you shouldn't hunt at all are actually dooming the breed, like deer.
Mother Nature is a lot more cruel than hunters are.
Right.
And if you think about this whole Pittman Robertson Act, it came about right after the tail end of the Great Depression. So wildlife numbers were in the toilet. They had been hunted out for subsistence hunters and for market hunters that was their job. So the ammunition and firearms manufacturers came together and set aside this money to fund state agencies where the agencies could manage that wildlife, because at that time, that was their customers.
Sure.
So if there wasn't wildlife, there wasn't customers for guns and ammunition. So it was a great business model. They funded the states to manage wildlife for healthy, sustainable populations. Therefore, that was a constant supply of customers for their products.
And when you think about it, this is a tax that was imposed upon the manufacturers because the people in the sport wanted them to do it. This was basically a popular thing.
It was.
Yeah, and I haven't heard of anybody voting for taxes since then.
No.
So how does the distribution go? It goes from the federal government direct to states?
It does. It does. The manufacturers write a check, and it goes to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to administer it. And Alabama gets our portion of it based on our land mass and the number of people that buy hunting licenses. Then it's distributed out to all the 50 states, and they don't just write us a check and say use it wisely. Let's just say they give us $100. I have to come up with match for that. I have to come up with $25. So I've got skin in the game too. It's not just this money.
Right.
So for every $1 of hunting licenses I sell, I have the potential to match it with $3 of the federal money. So it's a great investment from the state side as well as from the manufacturer's side.
So if people want more information on this, I mean, how do they get it?
The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has a great website that will go over all of this in great detail. Typically, each agency like ours, we have that information as well because we want hunters to understand it. We want target shooters to understand it. And that's sort of how the Partner with a Payer program came about, was NSSF working with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to educate NSSF members on where their money was going, to educate U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service where it was coming from, and then to the states where it was actually going on the ground. So putting all three of those valuable components together, some people were losing touch with where it was. You know, a lot of times now it's not the mom and pop company anymore that built it in their basement,
Sure.
that had an attachment to the land and to the conservation ethic. A lot of these people now that own these companies don't hunt or fish.
It's a business.
And it's a business, and 10% off of their bottom line, that's a big chunk that they write. So if they don't understand that that money is not being squandered, that it's not being used to promote conservation in the country, then it could possibly go away, and that would be the worst thing for wildlife in America. So the Partner with a Payer program has been tremendous. I hosted one in Alabama a couple of years ago where Joe Bartozzi came down, several NSSF employees, had representatives from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, had representatives from Kimber and Remington who had manufacturing operations in Alabama, and then my staff, and we went to a piece of public land that we had purchased using Pittman Robertson funds. And we had a program where we educated them on all the wildlife management activities that we were doing on the property, all the public access that we had on the property, carried them on a dove hunt that afternoon, shot a few pigs that evening. But the most important thing was getting everybody in a room just to talk about where the money came from, how it was administered, and then where the manufacturers could actually see on the ground where that money went. It's tangible when you can hold it in your hand. Here's a 5,000 acre piece of property that was purchased with excise tax dollars that we pay, and it's providing our customers with a great hunting opportunity. It was a tremendous event for all of us, my staff included, because they got to see who writes the checks.
I really appreciate you coming on the show and just kind of explaining that. It's really not as complicated as people think once you break it down.
It's not, and we can't do it without everybody.
Sure.
And that's, communication is a key, so this program, it's just going to get bigger and better over the next few years.
Chuck Sykes, thank you very much. I appreciate you.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me.
And for SHOT Show TV, I'm David Lombardo.